My wife drained our house money to a PYSHIC who said I was cursed. I told Donna to put the call on speaker so I could hear, and Donna said she already had. I could hear Carly sobbing in the background, saying she was sorry over and over. I spoke up and said Carly was a liar. The text messages clearly showed she knew exactly who Donna was and how much money we had saved. Carly tried to claim those messages were taken out of context, but I cut her off. I told her the message where she wrote about Linda working Donna and expecting to get 10 grand was pretty clear context. I mentioned that the police wanted to talk to her about her role in the fraud operation. Carly's crying stopped suddenly, and there was silence. Then the call disconnected. Donna asked if I thought Carly would actually face charges, and I said Margot seemed pretty serious about investigating everyone involved in Linda's operation. Craig called me that afternoon while I was stacking pallets. He said Linda's frozen bank accounts showed she had about $4,000 left. That meant she'd spent most of what she stole from Donna and probably other victims on her own expenses. He was filing a civil suit to try to recover whatever we could, but he warned me that even if we won the judgment, collecting the money might take years. Linda would probably claim she was broke and couldn't pay. The criminal restitution process would be separate and would depend on what happened at Linda's sentencing. Craig explained that judges could order restitution as part of a criminal sentence, but that also didn't guarantee we'd see the money anytime soon. He said the reality was, we might never recover most of what Linda stole, but at least she'd face criminal consequences. I thanked him for being honest and said we just wanted Linda to actually be punished for what she did to Donna and the other victims. Detective Howe called us 3 days later with news that made the whole situation feel bigger and worse. They'd identified 3 other victims of Linda's scam through her business records and bank statements. All 3 were women Linda had targeted through various social connections over the past year. One woman had met Linda at a yoga class. Another was referred by someone Linda knew from a Facebook group about spirituality. The third was a co-worker's sister who Linda had approached at a birthday party. The other victims had lost between $3,000 and $7,000 each to Linda's fake spiritual emergencies and curse removals. Detective Howe said all 3 women were willing to testify against Linda at trial. The prosecutor told her that multiple victims strengthened the case significantly and would probably increase Linda's sentence. Each victim showed the same pattern of gradually escalating payments for increasingly urgent spiritual problems. Detective Howe said Linda was clearly running a systematic operation, not just taking advantage of one person. She asked if we'd be willing to meet with the other victims so everyone could compare notes and support each other. I said we would. Donna came home from her first therapy session a week after the police station confrontation and seemed different. Lighter somehow. She'd found a therapist who specialized in helping people recover from financial scams and fraud. The therapist had explained that victims often felt shame even though they did nothing wrong, and that shame was exactly what con artists counted on to keep victims from reporting them. Donna said it helped to talk to someone objective who understood the psychology of how these scams worked. The therapist told her that Linda had used every manipulation technique in the book, from creating artificial urgency to exploiting family connections to isolating Donna from people who might question what was happening. Donna said hearing that from a professional made her feel less stupid and more angry, which felt like progress. She'd been blaming herself, but now she was starting to direct that anger where it belonged, at Linda. I took a morning off work to meet with our bank manager, Delbert Nelson, about the fraudulent withdrawals. Delbert was in his 50s with gray hair and reading glasses that hung on a chain around his neck. I'd brought all the documentation showing Linda's scam and asked if there was any way the bank could help us recover the money. Delbert reviewed the transactions carefully, checking the dates and amounts against the receipts from Linda's shop. He said that because Donna had authorized the withdrawals herself and they weren't technically fraudulent from a banking perspective, the bank wasn't liable for the losses. The bank couldn't reverse transactions that an account holder had willingly made, even if she'd been tricked into making them. But he did flag Linda's business account for suspicious activity and said he'd report it to their fraud department. He also helped us set up better account protections so nothing like this could happen again. We added dual authorization requirements for any withdrawal over $500 and set up text alerts for all transactions. Delbert said he was sorry this happened and wished he could do more to help. I thanked him for at least making sure our account was protected going forward. 2 weeks after we confronted Linda at the diner, Detective Howe called with another update. Carly had been formally charged as an accomplice to fraud for her role in recruiting Donna and receiving payments from Linda's operation. The prosecutor had enough evidence from the text messages and bank records to prove Carly knew what she was doing. Carly's lawyer had contacted Craig trying to make a deal where Carly would testify against Linda in exchange for reduced charges. Craig called us right after to discuss whether we should support the deal. He said Carly's testimony about the recruitment scheme and how Linda planned the whole operation would strengthen the case against Linda significantly. Without Carly's testimony, they could still convict Linda, but with it, they could prove the conspiracy aspect and probably get a longer sentence. Craig said he understood if we wanted Carly to face full consequences, but strategically, the deal might be worth it. Donna and I sat up late that night talking about Carly's cooperation deal. Donna said she wanted Carly to face real consequences for betraying their friendship and helping Linda steal our money. But she also wanted to make sure Linda got the harshest punishment possible, and if Carly's testimony helped with that, then maybe it was worth it. I said, I felt the same way. Carly deserved to be punished, but Linda was the mastermind who'd been running scams for 20 years. We called Craig the next morning and told him to agree to the deal only if Carly provided detailed testimony about Linda's entire operation and any other victims she'd helped recruit. Craig said he'd negotiate those terms with the prosecutor and Carly's lawyer. A few days later, he called back with the final deal. Carly would get probation instead of jail time, but she had to pay back her portion of the money she'd received from Linda's operation, which was about $1,500. She also had to provide complete testimony about everything she knew regarding Linda's methods and other potential victims. Craig said it wasn't perfect, but it was probably the best outcome for making sure Linda faced maximum consequences. The prosecutor's office scheduled a meeting with all of Linda's victims 2 weeks later to discuss the case and prepare everyone for trial. The meeting was in a conference room at the courthouse with bad fluorescent lighting and a long table. Besides Donna and me, there were 3 other women there with their husbands or partners. The prosecutor introduced everyone, and we went around sharing our stories. The first woman was named Jennifer, and she'd lost her entire inheritance from her grandmother, about $8,000. Linda had told her the money was cursed and needed spiritual cleansing. The second woman was Michelle, who'd maxed out 3 credit cards, about $6,000 total, before her husband discovered what was happening and made her stop. The third was Angela, who'd lost $5,000 on fake crystal healing sessions for her chronic pain. Listening to their stories was both heartbreaking and validating. They all described the same pattern of gradually escalating payments for fake spiritual emergencies. Linda had told Jennifer her dead grandmother was trapped between worlds. She'd told Michelle her daughter would get sick unless they did protection rituals. She'd told Angela that pharmaceutical companies were suppressing spiritual healing methods that actually worked. Every story showed how Linda found each woman's specific vulnerability and exploited it. We all cried together in that conference room, and afterward we exchanged phone numbers and promised to support each other through the trial. The prosecutor pulled up a PowerPoint presentation showing Linda's history across 4 different states. She'd operated under 6 different names over the past 20 years, always the same pattern of psychic shops and spiritual services that escalated from cheap palm readings to expensive emergency rituals. In Nevada, she was Madame Celeste. In Oregon, she was Sister Moonbeam. In Arizona, she was Mystical Marina. Each time she'd drain 10 to 15 victims before someone figured it out, and she'd pack up and move to a new city. The prosecutor showed us mugshots from 2 previous arrests where Linda had gotten probation and community service. She'd learned to be more careful over the years, keeping her scams just below the threshold that would trigger serious investigation. But this time was different, because we had the family connection documented and multiple victims willing to testify. The prosecutor said with Linda's history and the evidence we'd gathered, she was pushing for at least 5 years in prison. Donna went back to work on Monday, and I could tell she was nervous about facing her boss. She'd called in sick for 3 days straight without much explanation. Her boss asked to speak with her privately in his office, and Donna came out 20 minutes later looking relieved instead of stressed. Her boss told her his own sister had lost $8,000 to a multi-level marketing scheme 5 years ago and understood how these things worked. He said people who run these operations are professionals at manipulation, and Donna shouldn't feel ashamed about being targeted. Having her employer's support made a huge difference in how Donna felt about going back to her normal routine. She came home that evening and said it felt good to focus on regular work tasks instead of constantly thinking about the scam. Hank showed up Thursday night with 2 pizzas and a 6-pack of beer without calling first. He said he figured we could use some normal company, and he was right. We spent 3 hours on our couch eating pizza and talking about anything except Linda and the case. Hank told us about his latest dating disaster, where he'd tried to impress a woman by cooking her a fancy dinner, but set off the smoke alarm twice and gave them both food poisoning. Donna actually laughed for the first time in weeks, a real, genuine laugh that made her whole face light up. I realized how much tension I'd been carrying in my shoulders and back just from the constant stress of dealing with the legal process. Hank stayed until almost midnight, and when he left, Donna hugged him and thanked him for reminding us that normal life still existed outside of court proceedings and police reports. Craig called Friday afternoon with news about the case. Linda's lawyer had reached out to the prosecutor trying to negotiate a plea deal where Linda would plead guilty to reduced charges in exchange for avoiding a trial. Craig explained that plea deals were common because trials were expensive and risky for both sides. Linda was apparently willing to admit to some level of fraud if it meant getting a lighter sentence, maybe 2 years instead of 5. The prosecutor wanted our input before responding to the offer. Craig walked me through the pros and cons over the phone. A plea deal meant certainty, but less punishment, while going to trial meant we might get a harsher sentence, but also risked the possibility of Linda getting off with even less if something went wrong with the case. He said the evidence was strong, but juries could be unpredictable, especially when the defense would argue that Donna paid willingly for services she believed in. I called the other victims that evening, and we set up a conference call to discuss the plea deal together. Jennifer said she wanted Linda to face maximum consequences and didn't want to accept any deal that gave her less than 3 years. Michelle agreed and pointed out that Linda had been doing this for 20 years and always got away with minimal punishment. Angela said her husband thought they should take whatever guaranteed punishment they could get, but she personally wanted Linda to serve real time. We all agreed that we'd only support a plea deal if Linda got at least 3 years in prison and was required to pay full restitution to every victim. Donna called Craig back and told him our position. Craig said he'd communicate our requirements to the prosecutor and see if Linda would accept those terms. He warned us that Linda might reject the deal and force us to go to trial, which would mean months more of waiting and stress. While we waited for Linda's response, Donna and I sat down with our old spreadsheet to start rebuilding our savings. Opening that file was brutal because we could see 12 years of careful saving reduced to almost nothing. We had about $2,000 left in the account after Linda's withdrawals. Donna started crying, looking at the numbers and all the little notes we'd made about hitting each milestone. I pulled up a calculator and started working out a new plan based on our current income and expenses. If we both tightened our budgets and I picked up overtime shifts, we could probably save about $800 a month. That meant it would take 4.5 years to get back to where we were before Linda stole from us. Donna put her head on the table and said she felt like we'd lost more than money. We'd lost time we could never get back. I reminded her that at least we were both still working and healthy and together, which was more than some people had after getting scammed. Craig called back 3 days later with Linda's response. She'd rejected the plea deal because she didn't want to serve 3 years in prison. Her lawyer was apparently advising her to take her chances at trial, probably thinking they could argue down the charges or get a sympathetic jury. Craig said this was actually good news strategically because it meant we could present all the evidence publicly, and Linda's 20-year history of scams would be part of the trial record. The prosecutor was already preparing to bring in victims from Linda's previous operations in other states to establish a pattern of behavior. Donna was nervous about having to testify in open court, but said she was determined to make sure Linda faced real consequences. I told her I'd be right there in the courtroom with her the whole time. Iris came over the following weekend to help Donna prepare for trial testimony. I thought it would be gentle practice, but Iris was tougher on Donna than I expected. She played the role of defense attorney and asked Donna hard questions about why she kept going back to Linda, why she didn't tell me about the payments, whether she really believed in the spiritual services or just wanted an excuse to spend money. Donna got frustrated and snapped at her mom that she was being too harsh. Iris stopped and said the defense lawyer would be exactly this harsh, and probably worse, trying to make Donna look foolish or irresponsible to the jury. She said Donna needed to practice staying calm and factual even when the questions felt unfair or insulting. They practiced for 2 hours until Donna could answer the tough questions without getting emotional or defensive. Afterwards, Donna hugged her mom and thanked her for the tough love approach. 2 months after the initial confrontation at the diner, Linda's trial began on a Tuesday morning in late September. All the victims showed up to support each other and watch the case unfold. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, with wooden benches and fluorescent lights that made everything look washed out. Linda sat at the defense table wearing a conservative navy suit with her hair pulled back, looking nothing like the mystical Luna persona with all the jewelry and flowing scarves. The prosecutor spent the first day laying out the timeline of Linda's operation, showing the pattern of manipulation she used with each victim. She presented bank records, text messages, receipts, and the Facebook photos proving Linda knew exactly who Donna was and had deliberately exploited their family connection. The jury paid close attention, taking notes and looking between Linda and the evidence on the screens. Donna testified on the second day, and I sat in the front row where she could see me. The prosecutor asked her to walk through the timeline of her involvement with Linda, starting with the first $20 palm reading and ending with the $11,000 in total losses. Donna spoke clearly about how Linda gradually increased the urgency and cost of each spiritual service, creating fake emergencies that required immediate payment. She explained how finding out Luna was actually her cousin Linda made the betrayal feel even worse because Linda had used their family connection to build trust. She described how Carly's friendship had made everything seem more legitimate because Donna trusted Carly to look out for her interests. The prosecutor asked if Donna had any reason to suspect Linda was scamming her before I showed her the evidence, and Donna said no, that Linda had been completely convincing in her spiritual persona. I watched the jury watching Donna and could see some of them nodding sympathetically. Donna stayed calm and factual throughout her testimony, just like Iris had coached her, and I felt incredibly proud of how strong she was up there on the witness stand. The defense lawyer stood up looking confident like he thought he had an easy argument to make. He told the jury that nobody forced Donna or the other victims to pay for anything, that they all came to Luna's shop willingly and handed over money for services they believed would help them. He said this was really just a disagreement about whether the spiritual services had value, which made it a civil matter between customers and a business owner, not criminal fraud. He kept emphasizing the word willingly, like that was the magic word that would make everything okay. But then the prosecutor stood up and walked over to the evidence table where all the documents were spread out. She held up the business license showing Linda's fake name, Luna, next to her real driver's license showing Linda Kozlowski. She showed the jury the family reunion photos, proving Linda knew exactly who Donna was before the first reading ever happened. She presented text messages between Linda and Carly, discussing how to target Donna specifically because Linda had researched Donna's finances and knew about our house savings. She showed the escalating payment pattern, how Linda manufactured fake spiritual emergencies that required immediate expensive interventions, always pushing for more money before victims had time to think. She reminded the jury that Linda told Donna the curse was coming from me and would kill Donna unless she paid thousands of dollars right away. That wasn't offering a service, the prosecutor said. That was deliberate manipulation using fear and family trust to steal money. I watched the jury while the prosecutor talked and saw several of them nodding along. One older woman in the front row kept shaking her head when the prosecutor showed the text messages between Linda and Carly. A younger guy in the back row looked disgusted when he saw the fake emergency intervention receipt for $5,000. The defense lawyer tried to argue back, but he looked less confident now, stumbling over his words while he claimed Linda genuinely believed in her spiritual abilities. The prosecutor just pointed at the 20-year history of Linda running the same scam in different cities under different names. Nobody runs the same scam for 20 years if they genuinely believe in what they're selling, she said. The next day, Carly took the witness stand, and she looked terrible, like she hadn't slept in weeks. Her cooperation agreement meant she had to tell the truth about everything, or face the full charges herself. The prosecutor asked her how she met Linda, and Carly explained that Linda was her boyfriend Rod's mother, and about 6 months ago, Linda asked if Carly knew anyone who had money saved up and might be vulnerable to spiritual guidance. Carly admitted she immediately thought of Donna, because Donna had mentioned her grandmother's inheritance and our house savings during their friendship. She said Linda told her to bring Donna to the shop for a free reading as a birthday gift. Then Linda would take it from there. The prosecutor asked what Carly got in exchange, and Carly said Linda promised her 10% of whatever she made from Donna. Plus, Linda said she'd help Carly and Rod with their rent when they needed it. Carly described how Linda researched all her marks on Facebook and Instagram, looking at their posts to figure out their fears and desires and financial situations. Linda would tell Carly exactly what to say to each potential victim to make them interested in a reading, what problems to mention that Linda could then claim to sense during the session. For Donna specifically, Linda told Carly to talk about feeling stressed and anxious because Linda saw from Donna's social media that she posted about work stress. Then during Donna's first reading, Linda would pick up on that anxiety and offer cleansing services. Carly said Linda planned the whole thing like a script, knowing exactly how much money Donna had and calculating how to extract it over several months before Donna caught on. She admitted Linda specifically told her to keep Donna away from me as much as possible because husbands and family members were the biggest risk to the operation. The prosecutor asked if Linda did this with other victims, and Carly nodded, saying she helped recruit at least 4 other women over the past year using the same methods. When it was the defense lawyer's turn to question Carly, he tried to suggest she was lying to save herself from prison, but Carly just repeated the same details and showed more text messages on her phone that proved everything she said. The defense lawyer barely asked 10 questions before giving up and sitting back down. I looked over at Linda during Carly's testimony, and she just sat there with no expression on her face, like she was watching a boring movie instead of hearing how she destroyed people's lives. The trial lasted 3 days total with testimony from all the victims and financial experts who explained how Linda's operation worked. On the third afternoon, the judge sent the jury to deliberate and told us it could take hours or even days for them to reach a verdict. We went to the courthouse cafeteria to wait, and I got Donna a sandwich even though she said she couldn't eat. Iris sat with us and kept checking her phone like the jury might text her the verdict. But only 4 hours later, the bailiff came down and said the jury had reached a decision. We rushed back to the courtroom and my heart was beating so hard I could feel it in my throat. The jury filed back in, and none of them looked at Linda, which the prosecutor had told us was usually a good sign. The judge asked if they'd reached a verdict, and the jury foreman stood up holding a piece of paper. He said they found Linda guilty on all counts: fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, and operating a business under false pretenses. Donna squeezed my hand so hard I thought she might break my fingers, but I didn't care. Iris started crying next to us, these big relieved sobs that she tried to muffle with her hand. I looked at Linda, and she still showed no emotion at all, just sat there staring straight ahead like she'd expected this outcome. But then I saw Rod in the back of the courtroom, and he jumped up looking devastated and rushed out the door before the judge finished thanking the jury. The prosecutor came over after and shook our hands, saying this was one of the clearest fraud cases she'd ever prosecuted, and the jury did the right thing. We left the courthouse that day feeling lighter than we had in months, knowing Linda would actually face real consequences for what she did. 2 weeks later, we were back in the same courtroom for Linda's sentencing hearing. This was when all the victims got to give impact statements telling the judge how Linda's fraud affected our lives. The other victims went first, and each one described losing thousands of dollars, maxing out credit cards, having to postpone major life plans. One woman talked about how she'd been saving for her daughter's college fund, and Linda took $15,000 of it. Another woman said she almost lost her marriage because her husband found out about the payments and thought she was having an affair since she'd been lying about where the money went. Then it was Donna's turn, and I watched her walk up to the microphone set up in front of the judge's bench. She took a deep breath and started talking about how we'd spent 12 years saving $43,000 for a house down payment, putting away every spare dollar we could. She said we had a spreadsheet where we tracked every penny and celebrated hitting each $1,000 milestone. She explained how Linda stole $11,000 of those dollars in just a few months, destroying years of hard work and sacrifice. Donna said we had to postpone our dream of buying a house and starting a family because of what Linda did, and that betrayal hurt even more because Linda was family who deliberately used that connection to manipulate her. She talked about the shame she felt for falling for the scam and how hard it was to trust her own judgment anymore. She said Linda didn't just steal money, she stole Donna's confidence and sense of safety in the world. When Donna finished, the judge thanked her and told her she was brave for coming forward. Then the judge looked directly at Linda and said that exploiting family connections and vulnerable people for profit was particularly disgusting behavior. She said Linda had spent 20 years perfecting her manipulation techniques and showed no remorse even when confronted with the damage she caused. The judge said people like Linda were predators who deserved serious punishment. The judge sentenced Linda to 5 years in prison, followed by 3 years of probation. She also ordered Linda to pay full restitution to all victims, totaling $34,000 across everyone she'd scammed. Linda would be permanently banned from operating any kind of spiritual or psychic business once she got out, and if she violated probation, she'd go straight back to prison. It wasn't enough to undo all the damage or give us back the years of savings we lost, but it felt like real consequences, instead of Linda just walking away to run the same scam somewhere else. Donna actually smiled when we left the courthouse that day, the first real smile I'd seen from her in months. Iris hugged both of us in the parking lot and said, "Justice wasn't perfect, but at least Linda would spend the next 5 years behind bars thinking about what she did." We went out for lunch after, and Donna ordered wine even though it was only 2 in the afternoon, saying we deserved to celebrate. The other victims joined us, and we spent an hour talking about everything except Linda, just enjoying feeling like we'd won something back. The next week, Craig called us into his office to discuss the restitution payment process. He explained that collecting the $34,000 would be really hard because Linda had almost no money left in her accounts after spending everything she stole. The court could garnish Linda's wages once she got out of prison and found a job, but that would probably only amount to $200 or $300 per month. Craig did the math and said at that rate it would take years, maybe over a decade, to collect the full amount owed to all victims. He said we'd probably end up getting back a few thousand total if we were lucky, nowhere near the $11,000 Linda took from us. It wasn't great news, but it was better than nothing, and at least the court order meant Linda couldn't just ignore the debt. Craig said he was glad Linda finally faced consequences after running scams for 20 years, and he hoped our case would make it harder for other psychic con artists to operate. We thanked him for all his help navigating the legal system, and he said he was proud of how we handled everything, especially Donna for being willing to testify. When we left his office, Donna said she felt closure even knowing we'd never get all our money back, because watching Linda get sentenced made the whole fight worth it. That weekend, Donna suggested we celebrate the verdict by going out for a nice dinner, our first real date since this whole nightmare started. We went to an Italian place we used to go to for special occasions back when we were first married. Over pasta and wine, we talked about our future and what we wanted to do now that the trial was over. Donna said she felt like we'd been stuck in survival mode for months, and now she could finally think about moving forward again. I told her I was proud of how strong she'd been through everything, testifying in court and facing Linda even though it was terrifying. Donna said she was grateful I didn't blame her or make her feel stupid when I first discovered the scam, because that support made all the difference. We agreed that going through this together made us stronger as a couple, even though we wouldn't have chosen to experience it. We talked about starting to save for the house again, and Donna said this time she'd be way more careful about protecting our money. I reminded her that she was targeted by a professional con artist who spent 20 years perfecting manipulation techniques, so she shouldn't beat herself up about falling for it. By the end of dinner, we were holding hands across the table and making plans for the future, feeling hopeful in a way we hadn't felt since before Carly first brought Donna to that psychic shop. Donna kept going to therapy every week, and her sessions were really helping her process everything that happened. She came home one day and told me her therapist said financial scam victims often have trouble trusting their own judgment afterward, second-guessing every decision and feeling paranoid about being manipulated again. But the therapist was helping Donna separate what happened from her core sense of self, teaching her that being targeted by a skilled con artist didn't mean she was naive or stupid. Donna said she was learning to recognize manipulation tactics so she'd never fall for something like this again. She also said the therapy helped her stop feeling ashamed about what happened, because she realized Linda specifically chose her as a target and would have found a way to manipulate almost anyone in that situation. I could see Donna's confidence coming back bit by bit over the weeks. She stopped apologizing constantly for losing our savings and started talking about the future with actual excitement instead of guilt. She even laughed at herself one day when she caught a commercial for a psychic hotline and immediately recognized all the manipulation language they were using. Her therapist said that awareness was a sign of real growth and healing. Iris decided to organize a big family gathering to make sure everyone knew what Linda did, so she couldn't target any other relatives in the future. She invited about 20 people to her house, including aunts, uncles, and cousins from both sides of the family. During dinner, Iris stood up and explained everything that happened, showing people the evidence and court documents. Several family members were completely shocked because they had no idea Linda was even in town or running a psychic business. A few people admitted they'd had weird interactions with Linda years ago that made more sense now. One cousin said Linda had tried to borrow $5,000 from her a decade ago, claiming it was for medical bills, but the cousin got suspicious and said no. Another relative said Linda had shown up at a family funeral asking questions about who inherited what from the deceased person. Now everyone realized Linda had been gathering information to identify potential marks. The family talked for hours about Linda's pattern of behavior and agreed to cut her off completely. Nobody would visit her in prison or accept calls from her, and if she tried to contact anyone after getting out, they'd report it to her parole officer immediately. Iris said the family needed to support Donna's recovery and make sure Linda knew she'd burned every bridge. By the end of the night, everyone hugged Donna and told her they were sorry she went through this. The family solidarity felt good, like we had people on our side who understood what Linda did was unforgivable. 3 months after Linda's sentencing, we got an envelope from the court with our first restitution payment inside. It was a check for $250, such a tiny amount compared to the $11,000 we lost, but seeing actual money come back felt important anyway. Donna held the check and started crying. Not sad crying, but relieved crying. Like this proved Linda would actually have to pay something back, even if it took forever. We went to the bank that afternoon and deposited the check into our new house savings account, the one we'd started rebuilding from zero. I pulled up our spreadsheet when we got home and added the $250 to our balance, then wrote a note in the comments column that said, "First restitution payment." Donna said it felt like marking the official start of our financial recovery, proof that we were moving forward instead of just staying stuck in what Linda took from us. We'd saved about $4,000 on our own over the past few months through overtime shifts and careful budgeting, so adding the restitution brought us to $42.50 total. It was still a long way from the $43,000 we'd had before, but we were making real progress. Donna suggested we celebrate each restitution payment as it came in, treating it like a small victory instead of focusing on how little it was compared to what we lost. I agreed, and we ordered pizza that night, toasting with beer to the first step of many in getting our lives back on track. A few weeks after we deposited that first restitution check, Hank called and asked if we wanted to meet him and his new girlfriend for dinner. We hadn't seen much of him since the trial ended because he'd been busy with work and dating, so we agreed to meet them at this Italian place downtown. When we got there, Hank was already sitting in a booth with a woman who looked about our age with dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. He introduced her as Jessica and said she worked at First National Bank doing financial planning. Jessica shook our hands and told us Hank had explained what happened with Linda, and she was sorry we went through that. Over appetizers, Jessica asked about our savings goals and what we were trying to rebuild. Donna explained how we'd been saving for 12 years to get to $43,000 before Linda drained most of it, and now we were basically starting over with just the restitution payments trickling in. Jessica listened carefully and then pulled out her phone to show us some investment calculators. She said that with our income levels and the fact we'd already proven we could save consistently, we had more options than we probably realized. She walked us through some strategies like high-yield savings accounts that earned better interest than our regular account, and explained how we could set up automatic transfers so the money moved before we had a chance to spend it. Jessica said she was actually impressed we'd managed to save $43,000 on warehouse and bookkeeping salaries, because that showed serious discipline most people didn't have. She pulled up a spreadsheet on her phone and started plugging in numbers, showing us that if we saved $500 a month in a better account, and kept getting the restitution payments, we could probably hit $30,000 in about 3 years, instead of the 5 or 6 we'd been thinking. Donna's eyes got wide looking at the numbers, and I felt this weight lift off my chest because 3 years seemed possible where 5 years had felt crushing. Jessica gave us her business card and said to call her if we wanted help setting up better accounts, and she wouldn't charge us anything because we were friends of Hank's. On the drive home, Donna kept looking at Jessica's calculations on her phone and saying, maybe our house dream wasn't completely dead after all, just delayed. I told her we'd get there eventually, and this time we'd be smarter about protecting what we saved. 2 weeks later, Donna came home from work practically bouncing through the door. I was making dinner, and she grabbed me and said her boss had given her a raise. I asked how much, and she said $200 more per month, which wasn't huge, but felt like the first good news the universe had sent us in forever. Her boss had apparently sat her down that afternoon and told her he'd been noticing how much extra responsibility she'd taken on over the years, handling insurance claims, and managing the schedule and training new staff, and he should have given her a raise a long time ago. Donna said she almost cried in his office because the timing felt like some kind of sign that things were finally turning around. We sat down at the kitchen table with our laptop and pulled up the savings spreadsheet we'd been rebuilding. I added the extra $200 per month to our projections and recalculated everything using Jessica's advice about better interest rates. With Donna's raise plus my regular overtime shifts plus the monthly restitution payments, we were looking at saving around $750 a month instead of $500. Donna did the math 3 times to make sure it was right, and then she looked at me and said, "We could hit $30,000 in less than 3 years at this rate." I reminded her that was assuming nothing went wrong and we didn't have any emergencies, but even with some bumps, we were in way better shape than we'd been a few months ago. We ordered Chinese food to celebrate and spent the evening talking about house features we wanted, like a real yard and a garage and maybe a second bathroom. It felt good to dream again without the shadow of Linda hanging over everything. I started picking up extra overtime shifts at the warehouse to push our savings even higher. My supervisor had been offering weekend shifts for months, but I'd always turned them down because I liked having Saturdays off. But now I volunteered for everyone I could get. The extra hours meant I was working 6 days a week sometimes, coming home exhausted with my back aching and my feet sore, but every paycheck with overtime felt like we were actively fighting our way back to where we'd been. Donna worried I was pushing myself too hard and kept asking if I was okay, but I told her this was temporary, just until we built up a better cushion. She'd make me sit down when I got home and would rub my shoulders while we watched TV, and I'd fall asleep on the couch half the time. The guys at the warehouse noticed I was taking every shift available, and a couple of them asked if everything was okay at home. I didn't want to explain the whole Linda situation, so I just said we were saving for a house and wanted to accelerate the timeline. One of the older guys told me he respected the hustle, but to make sure I didn't burn myself out, because he'd seen plenty of people work themselves into injuries trying to make extra money. I appreciated the concern, but I felt more motivated than I had in years, like Donna and I were finally on the same team again, working toward the same goal. We'd check the savings account balance together every Friday, when my paycheck deposited, and watching those numbers climb gave me energy even when my body was tired. Donna started leaving me notes in my lunch about how proud she was of me and how we were going to make it together, and I'd save those notes in my locker at work. 6 months after Linda's trial ended, we sat down one Saturday morning and reviewed our savings progress. The account showed $6,000, which was nowhere near the $43,000 we'd had before, but it felt different this time. Every dollar in that account we'd earned through actual work and discipline, not just hoping Linda wouldn't steal it. Donna said she used to check the balance obsessively before, multiple times a day, because part of her was always worried the money would disappear. Now she only looked at it once a week, because she trusted it would be there, trusted that we were in control of our own finances. The restitution payments kept coming every month like clockwork, usually around $250, and we'd gotten into a rhythm of immediately transferring that money into savings before we could think about spending it. My overtime shifts had added probably $1,500 total over those 6 months, and Donna's raise had contributed another $1,200. We still had a long way to go, but the progress felt real and earned in a way our previous savings never had. I told Donna that losing the money to Linda had actually taught us to be smarter about how we saved and protected our finances, which was a terrible way to learn that lesson, but at least we'd learned it. She agreed and said she felt more confident now about our ability to reach our goals because we'd been tested and came through it. We decided to keep our timeline realistic and not rush things, because the house would still be there when we had enough saved, and this time, nobody was going to take it from us. Detective Howe called one afternoon while I was at work and left a message asking me to call her back. I waited until my break and called from the warehouse parking lot, wondering if something had happened with Linda's case. Margot answered and said she had some news she thought we'd want to hear. Linda's case had been used as a training example for fraud investigators across the state, and as a result, several other psychic scam operations had been shut down in different cities. Margot explained that the way Linda had used family connections and social media research to target victims was apparently a common tactic that a lot of investigators hadn't been watching for. By documenting our case so thoroughly, they'd created a template other departments could use to identify similar scams. 3 different psychic shops had been raided in the past month, and the owners were facing fraud charges, and at least a dozen potential victims had been contacted before they lost significant money. I thanked Margot for letting us know and said I'd tell Donna. When I got home that evening and shared the news, Donna got quiet for a minute and then said, knowing our nightmare had helped protect other people made what we went through feel less pointless. She'd been struggling with feeling stupid and ashamed about falling for Linda's con, but hearing that our case was helping investigators catch other scammers gave her a sense of purpose about the whole experience. A few days later, Donna mentioned she'd been thinking about volunteering to speak at community groups about how to recognize financial scams. She said if her story could help even one person avoid getting manipulated like she was, it would be worth the embarrassment of admitting what happened. I told her that wasn't embarrassing, it was brave, and I'd support whatever she wanted to do. Donna's first community presentation was at a senior center about 20 minutes from our apartment. She'd contacted them after seeing a flyer about their monthly safety seminars, and the coordinator had been enthusiastic about having a real fraud victim speak. Donna was nervous the whole week leading up to it, practicing her talk in front of me and asking if she sounded stupid or if people would judge her. I kept telling her she sounded clear and honest and that sharing her experience was going to help people. The morning of the presentation, she changed her outfit 3 times and almost backed out twice. We got to the senior center early, and the coordinator showed us to a room where about 30 older adults were gathered. Donna stood at the front with her notes shaking in her hands and started talking about how she'd met Luna and how the scam had gradually escalated. She explained the warning signs she'd missed, like the way Luna had created fake emergencies that required immediate payment and how the prices kept increasing once Linda knew Donna would pay. Her voice got stronger as she talked, and I watched the audience lean forward and start taking notes. When Donna finished, several people came up to thank her, and one woman pulled her aside to talk privately. The woman said she'd been seeing a psychic for 6 months, who kept telling her she needed expensive crystal treatments, and the psychic had been pressuring her to take money out of her retirement account. Donna's presentation had made her realize she was scammed before she lost anything significant. The woman hugged Donna and said she'd probably saved her life savings. On the drive home, Donna was quiet, but I could tell she felt good about what she'd done. She said helping that one woman made all the shame and embarrassment worth it. Our relationship felt different after everything with Linda, stronger somehow. We'd been through something genuinely difficult together, and instead of it breaking us apart, we'd come out more connected. Donna told me one night that she trusted me more now because when she was at her lowest point, feeling stupid and ashamed, I hadn't blamed her or made her feel worse. I'd just focused on fixing the problem and supporting her through it. I told her I was proud of how she'd turned her experience into something that helped other people, and that took real courage. We started talking about the future with actual hope instead of just anxiety about money. The house was still our goal, but it didn't feel as desperate anymore, more like something we'd achieve when we were ready rather than something we had to force. We went on actual dates again, not expensive ones, but coffee and walks in the park, spending time together without the weight of Linda's betrayal hanging over us. Donna laughed more, and I noticed I wasn't constantly checking our bank account balance anymore. We'd learned something important about ourselves through this whole mess, that we were tougher than we thought, and that our partnership could survive real tests. The trust between us felt earned now instead of just assumed, built on actually going through something hard and choosing each other every day. A year after Linda got sentenced, we'd saved $14,000 toward our house down payment. It had taken consistent effort and sacrifice, with me working overtime regularly and both of us being careful about every purchase, but seeing that number in our account felt incredible. The monthly restitution payments had added up to about $3,000 total over the year, and the rest we'd saved through our own work. Donna had graduated from weekly therapy sessions to just monthly check-ins, and her therapist said she was doing remarkably well processing everything that happened. We'd both learned to spot manipulation tactics we'd never fall for again, like people creating false urgency or using emotional pressure to get money. The trauma from Linda's betrayal was real and probably always would be part of our story, but it didn't control us anymore. We'd taken something terrible and used it to become smarter and more careful about protecting ourselves. Donna kept doing community presentations every few months, and she'd helped at least a dozen people recognize scams before they lost money. I'd cut back on the overtime shifts a bit because my body needed the rest, but we were still making steady progress. Looking at our savings spreadsheet together had become this weekly ritual where we'd update the numbers and talk about how close we were getting to our goal. 14,000 wasn't 43,000, but it was earned through our own effort and protected by better financial habits, and that made it feel more valuable somehow. Iris called one Sunday and asked if we could come over for dinner. When we got to her house, she had this serious look on her face that made me worried something was wrong. Over pot roast, she told us she'd been talking to other family members about our situation, and several of them wanted to help us with our house down payment when we were ready. Her sister had offered $5,000, and a couple of cousins had said they could contribute smaller amounts. Iris said the family felt terrible about what Linda had done and wanted to help us recover. Donna started crying and said that was incredibly generous, but we couldn't accept it. I agreed and explained that we needed to do this ourselves, to prove we could rebuild what Linda took without depending on anyone else. Iris looked disappointed, but said she understood, and she was proud of how we were handling everything. She made us promise that if we ever really needed help, we'd ask instead of struggling alone. We promised and thanked her for the offer, and I meant it when I said, knowing we had family support if we needed it, made us feel less alone. Iris said she'd been thinking a lot about Linda over the past year, about how money and bitterness had turned her into someone who would hurt her own family. She told Donna that we were stronger people than Linda ever was because we'd faced hardship and chosen to help others instead of exploiting them. We started seriously house hunting again on a Saturday morning, this time with $14,000 saved and a realistic plan to reach $30,000 within another year and a half. The real estate agent we'd worked with before was happy to hear from us and said the market had actually gotten a bit better for buyers. We spent the day visiting open houses, and it felt different from it had 2 years ago when we were just dreaming. This time we knew exactly what we could afford and what we were willing to compromise on. We saw a small house with a decent yard in a neighborhood near Donna's work, and another one that needed some fixing up, but had good bones. Walking through these houses, we talked about what we'd learned about protecting ourselves financially and about trust. Donna said she'd never take for granted again that family members had good intentions, and I said we'd both gotten better at recognizing when someone was trying to manipulate us. Our dream was still alive, just tempered with more wisdom about how the world actually worked. We knew now that some people would exploit family connections for money, that trust had to be earned and protected, and that rebuilding after betrayal was possible, but took time. The house we'd eventually buy would represent not just a place to live, but proof that we'd survived something terrible and came out stronger. Craig called on a Tuesday afternoon while I was loading pallets at the warehouse. He told me Linda qualified for early parole after serving 3 years instead of 5 because she'd been a model prisoner and taken some classes. She'd still have to pay restitution for the full term, though, which meant we'd keep getting those monthly checks even after she got out. Craig also mentioned that Carly had finished her probation successfully and moved to Oregon, and her probation officer said she seemed genuinely sorry about what she'd done. I thanked Craig for the update and told Donna about it that evening over dinner. She said she hoped Carly really had changed, but wasn't sure she'd ever fully forgive her for targeting us like that. I agreed and said at least Linda was still locked up for another year and a half, which gave us more time to rebuild without worrying about her showing up. 18 months after the trial ended, our savings account hit $25,000. We sat at our kitchen table on a Saturday morning looking at the number on the screen, and Donna started crying happy tears. I pulled up our old spreadsheet and showed her how far we'd come from basically nothing, and she said she was proud of us for not giving up, even when it seemed impossible. We decided right then that we were ready to start making real offers on houses instead of just looking. Our budget was smaller than the original plan, but we'd found a cute place with a small yard in a neighborhood near Donna's work that we both liked. The house needed some paint, and the kitchen was outdated, but it had good bones, and the price fit what we could afford. Making an offer felt scary after everything we'd been through with Linda, like we were tempting fate by hoping for something good. But Donna said we deserved this, and we'd earned it the right way this time. Our real estate agent called 3 days later to say the sellers accepted our offer. Donna answered the phone, and I watched her face light up as she listened. Then she started crying again and nodding. When she hung up, she told me we were actually buying a house, 2 years later than we'd originally planned, but it was really happening. I hugged her tight and reminded her that we'd done this through hard work and refusing to quit, even when Linda tried to destroy us. The down payment we were putting down represented more than just money now. It was proof that we could survive something terrible and come out stronger on the other side. Donna said she'd been so scared after the scam that we'd never recover, but here we were actually doing it. We called Iris that night to tell her the good news, and she cried too, saying she was so proud of how we'd handled everything. Moving day came on a sunny Saturday in early June. Hank showed up at 8 in the morning with his truck, and Iris arrived right after with coffee and donuts for everyone. A couple friends from my warehouse job came to help carry the heavy furniture, and Donna's co-worker from the dentist office brought boxes and packing tape. We loaded everything into the truck and drove to our new house, our actual house that we owned. Walking through the front door with our stuff felt surreal after living in that same apartment for 12 years. Donna planted flowers in the front yard that afternoon, while I unpacked boxes in the kitchen, and when I came outside to check on her, she was sitting on the porch steps, smiling. She told me she was genuinely happy in a way she wasn't sure she'd feel again after what Linda did to us. We'd learned some hard lessons about how cruel people could be, and that family connections didn't always mean someone was trustworthy. But we'd also learned that we were stronger together than we ever were apart, and that was worth more than any amount of money Linda had stolen from us. My wife drained our house money to a PYSHIC who said I was cursed. My wife Donna and I had been married 12 years, and we were finally in a good place financially. We'd saved $43,000 for a house down payment after living in the same crappy apartment since we got married. I worked warehouse shifts, and she did bookkeeping for a dentist office. Every month we'd put away whatever we could, sometimes just $100, sometimes more when I got overtime. We had this spreadsheet where we tracked every penny and would high-five each other when we hit another 1,000 saved. The plan was to buy a house by next summer, somewhere with a yard where we could have kids. We'd already been to a dozen open houses just to dream. Then Donna's friend Carly started taking her to this psychic named Luna who had a shop downtown. At first it was just $20 palm readings for fun. Donna would come home laughing about how Luna said she'd live to 90 or would travel somewhere tropical. I didn't care because $20 wasn't breaking us, and Donna seemed to enjoy it. But then Donna started going twice a week. Luna told her there were dark energies around her that needed cleansing. Each cleansing cost $200. Donna said it was worth it because she'd been sleeping better. I told her maybe she was sleeping better because she wasn't stressed about work. She said I didn't understand spiritual things. Next, Luna said Donna's aura showed signs of a family curse. Removing it would take specialized crystals that cost $1,500. I found the receipt in Donna's purse and lost it. That was supposed to be house money. Donna cried and said I cared more about money than her spiritual health. She said Luna warned her I would react this way because the curse was affecting me too. I told her to stop going, but she went anyway. Luna told Donna the curse was actually coming from me. She said I had an ancestral attachment that was draining Donna's energy and would eventually kill her unless they did an emergency intervention. The intervention required burning special herbs while Luna performed a ritual. Cost $5,000. Donna withdrew it while I was at work. I only found out when I checked our savings account to see if my paycheck had deposited. We were down $8,000 total at that point. I drove to Luna's shop ready to get our money back. The place was all purple curtains and fake crystal balls. Luna was this woman in her 50s wearing too much jewelry who talked in this fake mystical voice. She told me the spirits were angry about my presence and I was endangering Donna by interfering. She actually tried to charge me $50 just for entering her space with negative energy. I left and called my buddy Tony, whose ex-wife had gotten caught up with a psychic. He said these people were all con artists who researched their marks online. That gave me an idea. I spent the weekend digging into Luna's background. Her real name was Linda Kozlowski, and she'd been running psychic scams for 20 years. But here was the interesting part. Linda Kozlowski's maiden name was Hoffman. Donna's mom's maiden name was also Hoffman. I did more digging. Linda and Donna's mom were first cousins. They'd grown up in the same town. There were old Facebook photos of them at family reunions. Luna, the psychic, was Donna's cousin Linda, who she hadn't seen in 10 years. I kept digging and found out Carly, Donna's friend, was dating Linda's son Rod. Carly had been getting a cut of the money for bringing in marks. She'd targeted Donna specifically because Linda knew Donna had inheritance money from her grandmother, plus our savings. The whole thing was a setup. I printed everything out and waited for Donna to come home from her next session. She walked in carrying another bag of crystals that cost $3,000. I asked her how Cousin Linda was doing. Donna said I was being weird, and she didn't have a Cousin Linda. I showed her the family reunion photo from 8 years ago. There was Linda with her arm around Donna's mom. Donna stared at it for a full minute. Then I showed her Linda's old driver's license next to Luna's business license. Same person. Then I showed her the messages between Carly and Rod discussing their cut of Donna's money. Carly had written, "Your mom's really working her. We should get at least $10,000 from this one." Donna threw up, actually ran to the bathroom and puked. When she came out, she was crying so hard she could barely breathe. I held her on that bathroom floor, her body shaking against mine like she couldn't get warm even though the apartment was hot. She kept saying the same thing over and over. I told her she wasn't stupid, that Linda knew exactly what she was doing, that she'd been running this kind of scam for 20 years. We sat there until 3 in the morning while she cried and asked how her own cousin could do this to her. I didn't have a good answer for that. Around 2, she started getting angry instead of just sad, which felt like progress. She wanted to know every detail of how I figured it out, so I walked her through the whole investigation while we sat on the cold tile. By the time we finally moved to the bedroom, she'd stopped crying, but her eyes were swollen nearly shut. The next morning, she called her boss and said she had the flu. Her voice was so hoarse from crying that it actually sounded believable. I made tea and toast, even though she said her stomach hurt too much to eat. We sat at our kitchen table with all the bank statements spread out in front of us. $11,000 gone. She asked me to explain the investigation again, slower this time, and I showed her each piece of evidence. The Facebook photos where Linda had her arm around Donna's mom at a family picnic. The business license showing Linda Kozlowski operating as Luna. The messages between Carly and Rod where they discussed their cut. Donna's face crumbled when I got to that part. She kept staring at Carly's words about how Linda was really working her. She asked how she could have been so blind when it was all so obvious. I told her it wasn't obvious from the inside when someone you trust is lying to you. Donna wanted to drive straight to Linda's shop and confront her right then. She was already grabbing her keys when I stopped her and said we needed to be smart about this. If we just showed up yelling, Linda would deny everything and we'd have nothing. We needed to document every single thing first, build a case that couldn't be ignored. Donna didn't like it, but she agreed. We spent the whole day making copies of everything. Every receipt from Linda's shop, every bank statement showing the withdrawals, every text message between Donna and Carly about the psychic readings. I took photos of all the crystals and herbs Linda had sold her, each one with a price tag that made me want to punch something. A chunk of rose quartz for $300, dried sage for $200, a candle that was supposed to remove negative energy for $150. We filled an entire folder with evidence, and Donna cried again when she saw how thick it was. I called Hank around noon because his ex-wife had gotten caught up in something similar a few years back. He answered on the second ring, and I explained the whole situation. Hank said these psychic scammers were all the same, and we needed to talk to a lawyer before doing anything else. He gave me the name of an attorney called Craig Bowman, who handled fraud cases and did free first meetings. I called Craig's office right away, and his assistant got us in for the next afternoon. When I told Donna we had a lawyer appointment, she looked relieved for the first time since I'd shown her the evidence. She said she felt like we were actually doing something instead of just sitting around feeling stupid. Craig's office was in a strip mall next to a pizza place. The waiting room had old magazines and uncomfortable chairs, but Craig himself seemed solid when he came out to get us. He was maybe 50 with gray hair and reading glasses hanging around his neck. We sat in his office and laid out everything on his desk. The Facebook photos, the business licenses, the text messages, the bank statements, the receipts. Craig went through it all carefully, making notes on a legal pad. He said this was definitely criminal fraud, and probably conspiracy too, since Carly was involved in recruiting Donna. He explained that getting our money back would be hard because Linda had probably already spent most of it, but filing criminal charges might pressure her into some kind of payment plan. He said we should go to the police immediately and file a report. Donna asked if we really had enough evidence, and Craig said we had more than most fraud victims ever get. Craig asked if Donna had signed anything or given Linda permission to share her financial information with anyone. Donna went quiet for a minute, and then admitted she'd filled out a form during her first visit. An energy assessment form that asked about her income, her savings, her financial goals, her family situation. I felt sick hearing that. Linda had used that form to figure out exactly how much money Donna had and how much she could steal before Donna caught on. Craig said that form might actually help our case, because it showed Linda was planning this from the beginning. It proved she wasn't just providing spiritual services, she was researching her target. Donna started crying again, and Craig pushed a box of tissues across his desk. He said fraud victims always blame themselves, but this wasn't her fault, that con artists are professionals at manipulation. We left Craig's office and drove straight to the police station downtown. The front desk officer directed us to the fraud division on the 3rd floor. We waited in another uncomfortable room until a detective came out and introduced herself as Margot Howe. She was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with short dark hair and sharp eyes that made me think she didn't miss much. We followed her to a small office and went through everything again. Margot listened without interrupting, taking notes on her computer. When we finished, she said she'd seen plenty of psychic scams, but the family connection made this one particularly nasty. She said Linda knew exactly what buttons to push because she knew Donna's family history. Margot made copies of all our documentation and said she'd start pulling Linda's business records and bank statements right away. She warned us that building a criminal case takes time, but she'd move as fast as she could. That evening, Donna finally called her mom. I could hear both sides of the conversation because Donna had it on speaker. She told Iris everything, starting with the palm readings and ending with the discovery that Luna was actually Linda. There was a long silence on the other end. Then Iris started crying and apologizing over and over. She said she had no idea Linda had turned into this kind of person, that she hadn't seen her in 10 years. Iris said she was coming over right now, and Donna said, "Okay." 30 minutes later, there was a knock, and Iris came in carrying a casserole dish and her own box of tissues. She hugged Donna so hard I thought she might crack a rib. Iris kept saying she was sorry, like it was somehow her fault that her niece turned out to be a scammer. We sat in the living room, and Iris looked through all the evidence we'd collected. She stared at the family reunion photos for a long time. She told us that Linda had gone through a bad divorce about 10 years ago and moved away from the family. Nobody had stayed in touch because Linda made it clear she wanted space. Iris had no idea Linda was even in our city, let alone running a psychic business under a fake name. When she saw the text messages between Carly and Rod, Iris got angry in a way I'd never seen her before. She said Linda deliberately used their family connection to trick Donna, that she exploited the trust that comes from being family. She said that made the betrayal so much worse than if Linda had scammed a stranger. Iris looked at Donna and said they were going to make sure Linda faced real consequences for this. The three of us talked for hours about what to do next. Iris suggested she should be the one to call Linda and set up a meeting. She could pretend she didn't know about the scam yet. Just say she heard Linda was in town and wanted to catch up. Linda would probably jump at the chance to manipulate another family member. We could show up at that meeting with Detective Howe and confront Linda with all the evidence in a public place where she couldn't run or make excuses. Donna liked that idea, and so did I. Iris called Linda right then and put it on speaker. Linda answered in that fake mystical voice and sounded thrilled when Iris suggested coffee the next day. They agreed to meet at a diner on Main Street at 10 in the morning. After Iris hung up, we called Margot and told her the plan. She said she'd meet us in the parking lot tomorrow and we'd go in together. Linda had no idea what was coming. I stared at the ceiling most of the night, going over everything we'd collected on Linda and how tomorrow would go. Donna kept shifting next to me, punching her pillow and rolling from one side to the other. Around 2 in the morning, she whispered that she was scared Linda would somehow talk her way out of this. I rolled over and reminded her we had bank statements, Facebook photos, text messages between Carly and Rod, and a detective who'd seen this kind of scam before. Linda had no idea we were coming. Donna squeezed my hand and said she hoped I was right. I told her to try to sleep because tomorrow was going to be a long day. She nodded, but I could tell she was still wide awake, probably imagining a dozen different ways Linda might escape consequences. My alarm went off at 7, and neither of us had slept more than a few hours. I made coffee while Donna showered, and we barely talked during breakfast, because we were both running through the plan in our heads. Margot had told us to meet her at the diner parking lot at 9:30, half an hour before Iris was supposed to sit down with Linda. We got there 20 minutes early and sat in our car watching other people go in for breakfast like it was a normal Thursday morning. Margot pulled up right at 9:30 in an unmarked car and got out carrying a folder with all the evidence we'd given her, plus whatever she'd dug up on her own. She leaned in my window and went over the plan one more time, speaking in that calm cop voice that made everything sound manageable. Iris would go in first and sit down with Linda like they'd agreed. After a few minutes of small talk, Margot would text us, and we'd all walk in together. She warned us that Linda might deny everything or try to leave, but having a police detective present should keep things under control. Donna asked what happens if Linda just refuses to talk, and Margot said that was actually fine, because refusing to answer questions in front of family would look guilty as hell. Iris arrived right at 10, and we watched her walk into the diner. Through the big front window, we could see her scanning the room, then heading toward a booth in the back. Linda was already there, dressed in regular jeans and a sweater instead of all her psychic costume jewelry and scarves. She stood up and hugged Iris like they were actually happy to see each other. They sat down, and a waitress came over to take their order. Linda was smiling and gesturing with her hands, probably spinning some story about her life. She had no clue what was about to happen. Margot kept checking her watch and said we'd give them 5 minutes to get comfortable. Those 5 minutes felt like an hour. I could see Donna's leg bouncing up and down, her hands clenched in her lap. At exactly 10:05, Margot's phone buzzed, and she said it was time. We all got out and walked across the parking lot together. My heart was pounding, so hard I could hear it in my ears. The second we walked through the diner door, Linda's face changed. She'd been mid-sentence, laughing about something, and then she saw us coming toward her booth with Margot in her detective clothes. Pure panic washed over Linda's face, followed by this calculating look like she was trying to figure out her next move. Margot walked up first and introduced herself, showing her badge and asking if Linda would be willing to answer some questions about her psychic business. Linda's voice came out higher than normal when she said she wanted a lawyer. Iris started crying and asked how Linda could do this to family. Linda ignored Iris and tried to stand up, but Margot told her to sit back down because they needed to have this conversation right now. Linda looked at Donna and actually said the spirits had warned her that Donna would turn against the light. I felt rage shoot through me and had to grip the edge of the table to keep from yelling at her. Margot stayed completely calm and opened her folder, pulling out the first piece of evidence. She laid out the Facebook photos showing Linda and Iris at family reunions, Linda's old driver's license next to her Luna business license, bank statements showing the $11,000 Donna had withdrawn over 3 months. Linda kept shaking her head and saying this was a misunderstanding, that Donna came to her voluntarily for spiritual services. Margot pulled out the text messages between Carly and Rod, the ones where they discussed getting $10,000 from this mark. Linda's face went pale when she saw those. She tried a different approach, claiming Donna paid for legitimate services, and if Donna regretted her spiritual choices now, that wasn't Linda's fault. Margot pointed out that fraud is still fraud, even when the victim participates willingly, especially when the scammer uses family connections and lies about their identity. Other customers were starting to stare at us. The diner manager came over and asked us to take this outside because we were disturbing people trying to eat breakfast. We all moved to the parking lot, and Linda immediately tried to get to her car. Margot stepped in front of her and said she needed to come to the station for formal questioning. Linda started crying and saying she was a single mother just trying to make a living, that times were hard, and she did what she had to do. I almost laughed because we knew about her 20-year history of running these scams in different cities. Margot wasn't buying it either. She told Linda she could either come voluntarily or Margot would arrest her right here in the parking lot. Linda chose to come voluntarily. We followed Margot's car to the police station in our own car, with Iris riding with us. Nobody said much during the drive. Donna kept wiping her eyes, and Iris kept patting her shoulder from the back seat. At the station, Margot took Linda into an interview room, while the rest of us waited in a different room with plastic chairs and old magazines. A detective brought us coffee and said it might take a while. We could hear voices through the walls but couldn't make out words. After about an hour, Margot came out and told us Linda's story kept changing. First, she claimed it was all legitimate spiritual work, and Donna misunderstood the nature of the services. Then she said maybe the prices were higher than normal, but Donna never complained. Finally, she admitted she might have overcharged, but insisted it wasn't intentional fraud, just poor business practices. Margot said Linda's responses were textbook con artist behavior, the way she kept adjusting her story based on what evidence got presented. While Linda was still being questioned, another detective came and got Donna. He took her to a separate interview room to get her official statement about the timeline of payments and Linda's manipulation tactics. I wanted to go with her, but the detective said she needed to give her statement alone. I sat there with Iris for another hour, both of us drinking bad coffee and not saying much. When Donna finally came out, she looked completely drained. She told us she had to go through the whole thing step by step, from the first $20 palm reading to the final $3,000 crystal purchase. The detective had asked her to describe exactly what Linda said at each session, how Linda gradually increased the urgency and cost of each spiritual emergency. He was gentle about it, but thorough, and Donna said by the end she could see the manipulation pattern so clearly it made her feel sick all over again. But she also said something shifted during the interview, like describing it all out loud to a cop who took her seriously, made her realize she wasn't stupid. She was targeted by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Margot came back after another hour and sat down across from us in the waiting room. She had a yellow legal pad with notes scribbled all over it and looked tired but satisfied. She told us they were charging Linda with fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, and operating a business under false pretenses. The charges carried potential prison time, not just fines. They were also bringing in Carly for questioning about her role in recruiting victims and receiving money from Linda's operation. Margot explained that Linda would be released on bail later that evening, but her bank accounts were being frozen pending investigation. The psychic shop was being shut down immediately, and the landlord was notified that the business license was invalid. Donna grabbed my hand when Margot said that and squeezed hard. Iris asked if Linda could still contact Donna or try to intimidate her somehow. Margot said they'd include a no-contact order as part of the bail conditions, and if Linda violated it, she'd go straight back to jail. We thanked Margot for taking this seriously, and she said cases like this made her sick because predators like Linda specifically targeted vulnerable people who trusted them. We left the station around 6 in the evening feeling both relieved and completely drained. The adrenaline from the confrontation had worn off, and we were all exhausted. Iris insisted we come to her house because she didn't want Donna to be alone, and honestly, I didn't want to go back to our apartment either. Everything there reminded us of what Linda had stolen. Iris lived 20 minutes away in a small house with a garden out front. She made spaghetti and meatballs while Donna and I sat at her kitchen table not saying much. The house smelled like garlic and tomato sauce and felt safe in a way our apartment didn't right now. We ate dinner around Iris's old wooden table with mismatched chairs, and slowly we started talking about Linda. Iris said Linda used to be normal before her divorce 10 years ago. She'd been married to a guy named Phil who worked construction, and they seemed happy enough. But Phil left her for someone younger, and Linda took it really hard. She moved away and stopped coming to family gatherings. Iris said she'd heard through other relatives that Linda was struggling financially and had tried various business ventures that failed. She never imagined Linda would turn into someone who scammed her own family. Donna picked at her spaghetti and said she felt so stupid for not seeing through it. Iris reached across the table and grabbed Donna's hand, telling her firmly that con artists are professionals at manipulation. They study people and find weaknesses and exploit them. Donna wasn't stupid. She was targeted by someone who knew exactly what buttons to push. I added that Linda had 20 years of practice running these scams, and Donna never stood a chance once Linda decided to target her. Iris said the family needed to know what Linda did, so she couldn't victimize anyone else, and she'd make sure everyone heard the truth. The next day around noon, my phone rang while I was at work. It was Donna calling from home because she'd taken another sick day. She sounded shaky and said Carly had just called her. I told my supervisor I needed to take this and walked out to the warehouse loading dock. Donna said Carly was crying and begging for forgiveness. Carly claimed she didn't know Linda was Donna's cousin and thought it was just a business arrangement where she referred people to a psychic.